It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. If you're not watching the show over already, go check out our YouTube channel, subscribe to it, hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Also, go follow us on the listening platforms like Apple and Spotify. Leave a 5-star review there as well. And go check out the description where we've got the links to all of our great sponsors that you'll hear about throughout the show. The Penguins had an active trade deadline day last Friday. And, you know, I got to say, I think that Kyle Dubas, with the situation that he was in, I loved everything that was going on Friday. There wasn't the big splash that a lot of people, myself included, were kind of expecting with potential trade of Rickard Rakell. But as you predicted, it didn't happen. And they keep on to Rickard Rakell, which, again, I don't hate, but thought it made a lot of sense to move on from him if the price was right. But they did move on from several players, and they got a lot of comp or draft picks in return. They also made a trade with the Toronto Maple Leafs for a few NHL players. So I don't know where you want to start with this as far as like which transaction to talk about first, but I think there's a lot of good ones.
Well, obviously, we got to talk about the massive one that happened with Cody Glass going to the New Jersey Devils. No, the reason that I say that one first is because it seems like every year there's one that's like not really on our radar that ends up happening. And I'd say that is the one that gets dropped into that bucket this year. Cody Glass going to the New Jersey Devils. Get a third-round pick back in it along with two prospects that probably won't become anything, but, you know, add into the prospect pool, I guess. But yeah, just wild to me. That wasn't as many names as we brought up in terms of names that could be on the move for the Penguins. Cody Glass, we didn't really touch on.
Nope. So
that's why I wanted to start with him. Cody Glass had, you know, kind of bounced around between the second, third, fourth lines, kind of mixed up all within there. It's just, dude, like Danny actually put out a tweet about this. Like he was talking about how Cody Glass just didn't seem to have a plan, like when he would have the puck on his stick going into the offensive zone. And Danny, I guess, tweeted about that. And then Cody Glass DM'd him to ask for like a video of it. And was like not even being rude, like genuinely trying to work on his game and stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool. But anyways, so yeah, Cody Glass didn't spend much time in Pittsburgh, but fun little story. And he wore number 19. So like he should have seen this coming in terms of not having a very fruitful tender.
Yeah, that
tenure.
Curse of number 19 continues.
I don't know why I couldn't find that word.
Tenure, yeah. The curse of number 19 for the Penguins continues. No injury history really with Cody Glass, at least no serious injury history, but still not a lot of good fortune for whoever wears number 19 for the Penguins. I think I said the Steelers just a minute ago. But the interesting thing to me about this Cody Glass trade is that they are getting, so the full trade is they trade Cody Glass and Jonathan Gruden for Chase Stillman, Max Graham, who, to be honest, I can't tell you anything about those two, and a third-round pick. And the funny thing about that is earlier this offseason, back in August, whenever the Penguins acquired Cody Glass, they traded away Jordan Frasca for Cody Glass, a 2025 third-round pick, and a 2026 third-round pick. So this was some good dealing, in my opinion, by Kyle Dubas, because not only did he taking on Cody Glass, he got a third-round pick and a sixth-round pick, but then he flips Cody Glass for another third-round pick. Like that's just some wheeling and dealing by your GM, and it's a good move.
Yeah, good business there. Like that for sure. All right, so Cody Glass, yeah, not too much to add necessarily on that one. Talk about the deal with Toronto. Obviously, Kyle Dubas has a lot of history with Toronto. This one I know left kind of people scratching their heads a little bit with him acquiring Connor Timmins and Connor Dewar from the Maple Leafs in exchange, basically to be part of that Brandon Carlo deal, going to the Leafs, brokering that deal. But at the same time, like the Penguins needed bodies. Like as bad as that is to say, they need guys at the NHL level that, you know, didn't force them to call up guys from the AHL that they felt like weren't ready. So, you know, that does this. They'll get a look at two guys that had been under Kyle Dubas, obviously from his time in Toronto, and we'll see if either one of them are worth bringing back beyond 2025 season. So, not too much to make of this one. But what did you think of it, other than just the obvious? Like I said, they just needed warm bodies, and they were getting involved as a third team to broker a deal.
I mean, I didn't think much of it. I thought that it's more or less we were just the team that was willing to be able to take on a few guys, and we needed bodies. But I did read Yoey's article on The Athletic about like post-trade deadline thoughts, and he said that at least out of the two, he mentioned that Connor Timmins, he thinks that Dubas and the team actually likes and anticipates a future for. So when it comes to people that getting tenured contracts as an RFA, I would definitely expect one from Connor Timmins, at least based off of what Yoey was talking about. Connor Dewar, not really sure about. I mean, he didn't really do a ton so far. He, in 31 games, had 3 assists at the NHL level in Toronto this season. Has played in 2 games in Pittsburgh. So, I mean, maybe they tenure him a contract just because they'll have the space, and maybe he plays down in the AHL next year. But I think the main one to look at between those two is the defenseman Connor Timmins. Supposedly Dubas likes him a lot and would probably have him in his future plans for somewhere in that those bottom pairings for the Penguins.
Another deal, speaking of defensemen, one that we had talked about obviously just on the last episode in terms of bringing in, we were talking about, are they going to be able to flip him for picks? Is that kind of the idea here? With getting Luke Schenn in here, they do trade him to Winnipeg for a 2026 second round pick, as well as a 2027 fourth round pick. I mean, a 2 and a 4 for Luke Schenn. Again, this is just good business. We were wondering if they'd flip him, what they would get back for him, if they'd have to retain to get a 2, or if they could just trade him straight up and get a 3, or what it would take. But Winnipeg very much firmly in the playoff push, trying to win a President's Cup, trying to win a Stanley Cup. Makes a ton of sense, I guess, for them to acquire this player, even though this is my team, would not want them being buyers in this fashion. So yeah, again, good business by Kyle Dubas to get more for the player than he had given up just like 24 hours prior.
Yeah, and apparently in that same article that I was referencing with Yoey, Luke Schenn, and I guess I should start with the Penguins' perspective. The Penguins apparently wanted Luke Schenn around, and they were intending on keeping him and not flipping him at the deadline. But then Luke Schenn expressed to them that he wants to play for a contender. I don't know if any of you have been watching the Penguins recently. I don't really think that they classify under that bill. So, and the Penguins did not have to move on from Luke Schenn. So I guess from just being a guy standpoint, Luke, this is like a good pat on the back for Kyle Dubas, like trying to move Luke Schenn to a contender and getting a good deal out of it. I think, looking at the trade, I mean, just a few days earlier, he trades Michael Bunting and gets a 4th round pick for Luke Schenn and Tommy Novak. They expected future for Novak, expect him to be a contributor over the next few seasons, but then being able to essentially flip him for that 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick. I mean, you're basically for Michael Bunting and a 4th round pick, you got Tommy Novak and a 2nd round pick and a 4th round pick. Like I feel like that's a good trade off. In the grand scheme of things, again, like you mentioned, good GMing by Kyle Dubas, and there was just a lot of that going on the entire day from Kyle Dubas. And the last move to talk about that happened with Anthony Beuvillier, he was the one that we said for sure was going to be moved on from, even though we hadn't heard a lot of smoke about him. We just said, like, that is the name on the roster that makes a ton of sense. He goes just a few hours southeast of Pittsburgh, going to the Washington Capitals for a 2nd round pick. Pretty rare trade that happens, especially in season trade deadline time between some division rivals with the Capitals and the Penguins. But getting a 2nd round pick this season, which they did not have out of the Washington Capitals, I feel like that's just a good move and getting the most out of your assets if you're Kyle Dubas. And that pretty much caps it off. Like we said, there was no big trade from trade deadline day, just a lot of little trades that are accumulating the draft picks. And if you look at the Pittsburgh Penguins breakdown of draft picks right now over the next few seasons, they have 2 first-round picks this year, potentially, depending on what happens with where New York finishes in the standings. They have a 2nd-round pick this year, 3 third-round picks this year. And then they have their the next 2 years, 5 second-round picks in 2026 and 2027, and 5 third-round picks in 2026 and 2027 combined. So, I mean, the Penguins, if Kyle Dubas is doing his part in trying to build up the future of this organization, he's doing a good job of that. That's the most early draft picks I think the Penguins have had in a very long time. And hopefully he can do the most with those draft picks. But I feel like from a team that you knew was going to be sellers at the deadline, I think that he did a really, really good job of acquiring the most out of those players.
What a seller's market we saw develop in the NHL during the course of the trade deadline. I mean, Anthony Beuvillier for a second, Luke Schenn for a second and fourth, just crazy. And you mentioned the good GMing done by Kyle Dubas. Like, I don't want to give full credit to the market. I don't want to give full credit to Kyle Dubas here, but I will say I feel like ever since the first free agency of Kyle Dubas, right, where Tristan Jarry, Ryan Graves, we can definitely agree that those should not have been contracts that were signed. He's pressed pretty much all the right buttons since then, in my opinion, in terms of how to get this franchise back on track. It's not like, I think for a lot of people, the question is going to be the patience. Like, this isn't an easy task. This isn't like a short-term thing here. He's going to need some time to really see this vision out. But the accumulation of assets has me very encouraged for what this could be. So now it's just about, finding the talent, developing the talent, and how quickly they can get back. Are they going to be able to get back into a window of contention with Sidney Crosby still on the roster? It's like they're in that fight really against time. And I feel like Kyle Dubas openly acknowledged that during his press conference.
Yeah. I mean, supposedly that's the plan, to be able to get back into contention with Sidney Crosby still on the roster. I mean, he mentioned Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. We'll see the reality of that, if that's going to actually happen. But I feel like he's doing well outside of what you just mentioned, the first off season with him, which, I mean, Ryan Graves, that was just a flat out bad signing. And I as much as I hate the Tristan Jarry contract, I can't put that all on Kyle Dubas, because of the situation the Penguins were kind of in with goaltender and the free agent market with goaltenders that season, and also the trade market for goaltenders. Like, I hate the contract, but I also understand why they did what they did with who they did.
Here's what I'll say is, let's relate this to the Steelers real quick. Kyle Dubas decided to sign Sam Darnold to that contract as opposed to just taking the cheaper option and living with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. That's fair.
He did something like Omar Khan has made a lot of missteps, especially when it comes to the wide receiver position as of late, but he doesn't blink, and he's going to end up getting the deal that he wants. Kyle Dubas he took a look at the market, saw it wasn't great at the position, said, well, here you go, take this massive contract, as opposed to just saying, we're going to deal with, 2 bridge guys. We're going to bring in Alex Nedeljkovic and this other 1B tier goalie, and they're going to split the net for a year, and then we'll figure it out a year down the road. He instead decided to hand out a bad contract to a guy that I will admit, like, had shown at least flashes in the past and at least had familiarity with the organization. But yeah, I obviously has been an albatross of a contract. And honestly, we're going to tie this into what's going on recently anyways. Tristan Jarry, if he's going to continue to play like this, it's just going to piss me off, because now he's playing really well. And what's going to happen is he's going to play the Penguins out of a top 5 pick. That's what's going to happen here. When it doesn't matter, all of a sudden, Tristan Jarry is going to have found his game.
Yeah. It's only been a couple games, 2 starts since he came back up from his AHL stint after being put on waivers. But in those 2 games, he's been a game changer.
What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I am wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out.
Yeah, he's been a game changer over the last couple of games. But like you mentioned, that's not necessarily something that we want the Penguins to be doing. We have very vocally said that we think that is the best case scenario for the Penguins to just keep losing those games. I don't know what Tristan Jarry's been eating for breakfast on those game days, but he does not look like the same goalie that they sent down. The Penguins look like the same team in front of him, but they're actually getting saves when they need some. And it's kind of a different route that we have to kind of navigate through this conversation with, because normally we'd be talking about how this is a good thing, and that's kind of turned on its heel and flipped to 180. We don't want this to be happening, not only because we don't want necessarily Tristan Jarry, and this is nothing against the man, nothing against the person, but like we don't want him to be really having a ton of success at the NHL level, because we don't want this experiment to continue or prolong itself longer than it needs to be. But also, what you just mentioned, like playing yourself out of a potential top 5 pick, that's also something we don't want to do. If you're going to be this bad, you might as well go all in with it. Tristan Jarry over 2 games has been preventing that.
Yep. So, I mean, listen, from Tristan's perspective, say this is him getting right. That's awesome to see. I guess the question becomes, do you think it's still salvageable for him? Like, could the rest of the season determine what his future is with the Penguins? Or do you think that they're ready long-term to move forward with, Blomqvist, Murashov, whatever?
I thought that they were ready, and maybe if he has a great end to the season, that changes things. I just think that the nail in the coffin on his career with the Penguins, no matter him being brought back up or not, was that he was put on waivers. I just never thought that was going to happen. I didn't think he'd be claimed on waivers, so not surprising that he got all the way down to the AHL. But I just didn't think that was going to happen with him being in the AHL level, the contract that he has. I didn't think that Kyle Dubas would push those buttons. And so for me, the status of his long-term future for the Penguins hasn't changed that much. Maybe it slightly changes a little bit if he plays well. But maybe if he plays well to close out the season, that makes it easier for the Penguins to move on from him. Maybe you find a team that would be willing to take on a contract like that, especially with the cap moving up over the next seasons. You might find a team that's more willing to take on that contract with a kind of imbalanced goalie, and as far as like if he's playing well or not. I think that there's definitely some give and take though in that, because if he's playing well, you would assume that the Penguins are winning games, because a lot of the season, sure, the Penguins have not played well in front of their goaltenders, but it seems like, especially over this last stretch that we just had with Nedeljkovic and Blomqvist, the thing that we've been complaining the most about was that you just can't get a freaking save when you needed one. Yeah. If they start getting that, then they might start winning some games, and that could knock them out of that potential lottery pick status. And that's not something that we want either. So I think that's like a teetering rope that the Penguins are going to have to balance on.
Well, as I say, let me ask you this. Is it more important to get the highest possible pick, or for Tristan Jarry to be right not only this year, but going forward? Like, say he has, stabilized his game and he is the solution in net.
That's the thing. Like, I don't know if I want to continue that experiment. I mean, we're almost 2 years completed out of that 5-year contract. We have 3 years left. I'm almost ready to turn over the keys to like seeing what Blomqvist can be full-time in an NHL starter.
And they got to move on from Andy Chiodo, by the way, before next season starts.
100%. I think that is a surefire move that needs to happen this offseason. But regardless of the goalie coach, I think that the experiment with Tristan Jarry, no matter how he finishes this season, should be over at some point. And I really hope that turns into you just find a team that's willing to take on a contract and trade him, even if the Penguins have to retain on him somewhat. I would expect that they'd have to, but I'd be willing to do that if you got that contract off the books, move on full time, and see what Blomqvist can be as the NHL goalie if he does turn out to be the starter. And like you mentioned, Sergei Murashov is in the AHL. He was lighting it up in Wheeling, lighting up in the AHL. I feel like he's probably going to come to Pittsburgh sooner than later, and I just don't want another stockpile of goalies to have that's preventing some younger guys that could be a potential future piece coming up. And so do I think that the value, I don't know how to answer that question, by the way, of like, is it more valuable for him to be better? Because to me, it's not even that I think he's better for the future of the Penguins. I think it would be like, the question would be, is it more valuable for the Penguins to be in that top 5 pick contention, or is it better to play Tristan Jarry in as such that they could move on from him and get that contract and just wipe their hands clean from that. Because to me, I just don't even want to entertain the thought of Tristan Jarry being the future of the net for Pittsburgh. And I feel like if that was still on the table, he would not have gone on waivers. And that, to me, that is still the nail in the coffin for that whole conversation.
Yeah, it's fair. And we know how the fan base feels about him, so I wonder how that would go. And I'll be honest, like the thing is, him playing well right now isn't doing him any favors with the fan base either. Like I think there's a good portion of the fan base that realizes it's time to turn the page and focus on what that draft pick is going to be. So, but a goalie that was beloved within the fan base, Marc-Andre Fleury, playing his last game against the Penguins in this recent stretch since our last podcast. How cool was it? Not only obviously for that moment before and after the game and all the clips that come from it, the 3 goals by the Penguins that were scored in that game, Sidney Crosby, Geno Malkin accounting for all 3. Like the only thing that would have been better is if Letang had scored
got one
of the
too.
goals. But yeah, just an awesome moment, awesome game, awesome career for Marc-Andre Fleury. The longevity is what I'll think of first and foremost. The Penguins, despite him only being like finishing a series in one of the Stanley Cups as the starter, they don't win those other ones without him along the way too. So big shout out to Maff, one of the most beloved Penguins of all time. And yeah, what a moment for him.
Yeah, if you're a longtime listener of the show, I've said it in the past that prior to his departure to Vegas, Marc-Andre Fleury was my second favorite Penguin after Sidney Crosby. A great and storied career. Hall of Famer goalie for sure. Second all time in the NHL wins list. I think that not enough can be said about how good of not just a goaltender, but a person Marc-Andre Fleury is. Just an amazing character to have in your locker room, amazing guy. And what a great career that he's had. And to top it off with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin getting the goals against him in their most likely final meeting that they'll ever have with him. I mean, it's just great to see. And like you mentioned, awesome in that 2009 Cup run. And as you mentioned before, in 2016, he was being a great goalie and got injured right before the postseason. And that's when we had Jeff Sackhoff, actually, before Matt Murray came and Mr. Game 1. And then that whole saga played out. But in 2017, underrated. I feel like if you people go back and watch that 2017 Washington Capitals series, like the Penguins do not win the Stanley Cup in 2017 without Marc-Andre Fleury, especially in that series. So, I mean, I love Fleury, one of my favorite Penguins ever, one of my favorite hockey players ever. Nothing but the best in his retirement. It's sad to see him go, especially because it feels like even though we still have our core in Pittsburgh, he still was part of that core for a very, very, very long time. So this is like the really writing on the wall of like the beginning of it, the end for the core that we had in such a long time in Pittsburgh. He's like the first of those guys to fall into retirement. And then eventually the other guys are going to be following him with like Letang, Geno, and Sid. So sucks to see him play, but man, what a career, what a player, what a guy.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. When I look at what the Penguins have looked like since the deadline, I'm very intrigued by Tommy Novak. I mentioned that on the last podcast we did. He's day to day with an injury that he suffered, but like he just looks super creative. Like he always seems to have a game plan for what he wants to do with the puck, where he wants it to go, and just like the hockey sense that he plays with. So I'm excited about what his Penguins tenure is going to look like. Hopefully he can get back out there sooner rather than later. And like I was going down through here, like completely forgot that we reacquired Danton Heinen. Like completely forgot that he was part of that deal with Vancouver. But yeah, we'll see. It's that Geno was playing with Tomasino and Novak.
Yeah,
the 2 guys that were just like cast off from Nashville. But yeah, we'll see how things go for the Penguins post deadline here. This is like what I was looking forward to, but at the same time, there wasn't as much turnover as we had maybe hoped that there would be at the NHL level to bring a bunch of guys from the AHL up. But like, I would like to see that happen once we get through, the AHL playoffs. Obviously, Wilkes-Barre wants to make their run and see how far they can go and stuff, and we'll see what happens there. But I would like to get some of those guys up here to play at the NHL level and see what they can do. Just because I feel like that's what the rest of the season should be, is like an evaluation process.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And when you look at the bottom six of what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
I mean, every single time the Penguins tweet out their lineup, I look at the top six and I'm like, okay, especially whenever they had Tommy Novak in there instead of Danton Heinen, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And then I look at the bottom six and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is one of the ugliest things I've ever seen. I mean, like, is anybody really going to be that worried if like Imama or Achari or Benstrom or Bemstrom, excuse me, all come out? Connor Dewar. I know they just recently acquired him, but like, is anybody going to be complaining that prospects are playing over them at the NHL level? I don't think so. So I agree with you on that. Last thing that I could think of to bring up, as far as the recent play, Sidney Crosby in this game, he set a record for having the most multi-goal games in NHL history against 31 franchises, 31 franchises. The only team that he has not done it against currently of active teams is Utah Hockey Club and obviously Pittsburgh Penguins, because he can't score goals on himself. Or I guess he technically could, but that wouldn't be good. But yeah, it just, when you think about Sid and just like him continuing to break records, it's crazy to think that there's still like, that's something that I wouldn't even have thought of like a record that could be broken this year. And still, 31 different franchises scored multi-goal games on. That's awesome.
I would hate to be part of the Utah Hockey Club the next time they play the Penguins.
Yeah, honestly, because I'm sure obviously Sid knows that now too.
Sid finds that out, yeah. If he doesn't already, they're screwed.
Yeah. 70 points on the season so far. 70 points through 65 games, on pace for 86 and a half, or I guess you could round up to 87 points because he missed 2 games. So that brings his like on pace level down, because if he plays every game for the rest of the season, he's only going to play 80 games instead of 82. We'll see if he turns up an extra gear though to see if he can crack that 90 spot. They have 15 games left in the season, so he would be having to score at a pretty consistent rate over those 15 games. But not saying he can't do it. Obviously, Sid is the type of player that can do it. But currently, since he's only playing 80 games at max this year, only needs 11 more points to have at least a point, or I think 10 more points to have a point per game season.
Okay. All right. Well, that's what we're watching for. That's what we need to have happen. Otherwise, Sid, no, I'm not going to say it. I can't use him to do this. I was to say you're not going to make the cut. He'll make the cut. Guys like Dewar, Imama. Who else did you mention there? No, Achari,
Bemstrom,
Matt Nieto. They're not making the cut. Smitty from Around the 412 here. And while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app The Cut. Book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. All right, good stuff. Anything else to add on the Penguins?
No. Looking at their upcoming games, which I guess we haven't technically decided when these are coming out. I assume we'll have this come out on Thursday, the 13th, though, since there is a hockey game that day. They play the St. Louis Blues, and then they play on Saturday against the New Jersey Devils, and next Tuesday against the New York Islanders. A couple divisional foes, West Coast Conference foe. Can't imagine the Penguins are going to fare well in any of those games, but who knows? If Tristan Jarry continues to be that game-changing goalie, we might see some wins start to happen.
We'll see. We'll see. So follow along. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Hit us in the comments with your thoughts, any questions, topics for a future episode. leave them in the comments as well. Notification bell, very important though. Be sure to hit that whether we post a new episode, clip from a show, or of course when we go live like we will for the first round of the 2025 NFL draft. Not that you guys maybe care about that. Maybe you're only Penguins fans, but if you're also fans of the NFL, not just the Steelers, maybe there's Penguin fans that are a fan of a different NFL team. Be sure to tap in with us for the first round of the NFL draft. We'll be here that Thursday. We did the whole 7:30 thing and we were way too early because it doesn't start until like 8:30 really. So we'll be here around 8 p.m. that night. And let us know how you feel about prizes. Would you rather have more prizes, but maybe less valuable per prize, or less prizes that are like Steelers tickets being the prize? So let me know in the comments how you feel about that. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, just search Around the 412, leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there as well. And whether you are listening or watching, be sure to hit us, not hit us in the comments, check out the description, whether you are watching or listening, and check out all of our sponsors. We talked about Game Changers. Save yourself $10 over there using code AT412 at checkout. Everything Custom Designs, our friend Haley Wagner, small business. You can get some Around the 412 merch from her, whether it's a hoodie, long sleeve, short sleeve, glass tumbler. You can get it with our logo. You can get it with your own logo, whatever you want, something customized for you as well. Our shorts, DC4L Customs, they come in gray, black, white, whatever you want. It is starting, the weather's breaking. It's been 60 degrees here now, like the last 4 days. So we're getting into shorts weather now. Hopefully that this sticks. So be sure to go get yourself some shorts over there. Already talked about Keach Barbershop, of course. And then right above Tyler right now, Marcello Electric, our friend Brandon Marcello, a.k.a. Boots, his electrical company, serving in, yes, Beaver, Allegheny, Lawrence, and Butler counties. Whether it's commercial, residential service calls, he can help you out. Reach him at 724-614-0611. Again, 724-614-0611. Marcello Electric. The link to his description, the link to his Facebook page is in the description of the show, where he will give the description of everything that he can do for you, along with some pictures of work that he has done in the past. When you're doing as many,
the link to his description is probably on, like, I don't know, Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, something like that.
Yeah, probably. Well, no, I mean he's a married man. He has a family.
Yeah, that's two.
So.
That's two. Never mind.
I would hope not. But hey, Boots, if you don't tell, we won't tell. No, I'm just kidding. Definitely don't support infidelity. But anyways, be sure to strap in the notification bell, as we said. Be sure to follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. For Tyler, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Penguin Show. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.